Hello and welcome to this exclusive interview with Kazinform. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's hope we'll have a fruitful discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I must say I'm extremely happy to be back in Kazakhstan after, I think, some 6 years.
So let's jump right in. The first question regarding the future plans. The EU-Central Asia Summit will take place in Samarkand in April. Can you provide more details about what will be discussed and what is the political significance of this summit?
I think the summit, which will take place already next week, the 3rd and 4th of April, is extremely important because that would be the first summit where all 5 Central Asian leaders will meet also with the leadership of the European Union, the President of the Council and the President of the Commission, and look forward, and this is something that we see as the partnership in areas which are of common interest to both regions, because we look at Central Asia as an important partner, both in economic development, also in political dialogue, and of course, I mean, Central Asia, by its very name, it is central. It's in the center of our continent, and it provides us with connectivity, either east-west or north-south. So this is something that discussions in Samarkand will be focused on, and those are connectivity, cooperation on critical raw materials, cooperation in areas related to environment, water, climate change, of course, security situation in our immediate vicinity. So things are that we are going to discuss and set actually sort of the roadmap for the future work together.
So let's dive into some of the details of our cooperation. How is cooperation developing among Central Asian countries within the CSTO and CSO and other regional organizations, in your opinion?
I think for us, the most important thing is that there is a greater degree of internal cooperation and integration within the Central Asia. And there we see very good developments in recent years, now with regular consultative meetings of the leaders. Then I understand that there are several levels of sort of those meetings at the various levels, ministerial, expert levels, and so discussing issues of common interest to the countries of Central Asia. So I think this is extremely important. Another thing is that, of course, there are various international fora in which we do participate, either European Union or the Central Asian countries, and it's really for your countries to decide in which fora they find that those goals that they are setting for themselves helps them the most. And, you know, we know countries, not all of the countries, they belong to various organizations, some of them full members, others are observers. I think this is something that's really each and every country decides for itself. And of course, there are very important international fora where we are presented together, like the United Nations or the OSCE. And I think there we can interact and work together actually to achieve our common goals, including issues like actually preserving and maintaining the rules-based international order.
Next question regarding economics. What European investment projects are currently being implemented in Central Asia?
Probably I should start by explaining that by European investment projects, I mean, there are two completely different things. I mean, the one is what the European Union as an organization is doing here, going through our cooperation programs with the countries of the region, actually supporting economic development, social development, issues related of common interest like water, climate, environment. So there are EU programs through which, and also actually connectivity, something which is extremely important, where, for example, European Union has its dedicated global gateway program with up to 550 million euros available for this support. But of course, investments as such into the economy, into companies, into creating jobs, this is something which is done by the private economic operators. And here I think the important thing is that in general we are the second trading partner to Central Asia. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, something like 40% of all the foreign direct investments in the region, they are coming from Europe. So we are present here as private investors in many very important areas of the economy, but also as the European Union supporting economic development and actually increasing connectivity between our two regions, because frankly speaking, it's not enough to produce some goods. You need external markets, you need to deliver those goods to external markets. And if we want to develop bilateral trade, it's extremely important that we have those trading routes open, existing, open, developed, so that those goods could move between two of our regions.
Building more on that topic, which sectors of Central Asian economy are currently the most attractive for European investments and investors?
I probably wouldn't sort of invent the wheel by saying that currently probably the most important sector would be the critical raw materials. Because both the European Union, its member states, but also globally, if we want to achieve those climate change targets, which means our transition to a greener economy, and there are commitments which are undertaken by the European Union, there are commitments which are undertaken by the Central Asian countries, including Kazakhstan, very ambitious targets, I must say. And we are very grateful for that, because this is a global problem and we must tackle it together. For that, we need this green transition towards renewable energy. And that means we need a panoply of various raw materials, mostly metals, actually to enable us to produce more batteries, to produce more electricity generating equipment, like solar panels, like wind turbines and others. I mean, we need copper actually to lay cables to connect generating capacities with consumers. So I would say this is what was the oil for the 20th century. For the 21st century, I would say this, what we call the critical raw materials, is the new most important area where we see that we need to achieve our green transition.
What are the current prospects for expanding economic cooperation between Central Asia and European Union aside from raw materials?
I think there is probably not enough of potential which exists here in Central Asia, discovered also from the European side. I mean, frankly speaking, for decades, both investors from Europe or also European consumers, they were looking at some other producers. I mean, the big ones like China, just east from you, Southeast Asia and others, to source many goods. Here, Central Asia has enormous potential for producing also these goods. I mean, you have a available workforce, and actually rather qualified, I must say, well-educated workforce here in Central Asia. You have raw materials, both ones that you could extract from the earth, others that you could grow here. It's both for industrial products, for textiles, but also for the foodstuff. I mean, there are things that can and should penetrate European markets, and European consumers must have, possibility to enjoy things that you have here.
One of the sectors that we haven't talked about is technology. Kazakhstan is rapidly developing in AI sector, especially. Does EU have programs to support startups and innovative technologies in Central Asia?
Indeed, I mean, startups are extremely important in a way that they can achieve, the breakthrough where sometimes those already established companies and large companies, they would hesitate to risk. I mean, we need, young and ambitious people going to business and actually willing to risk, not being afraid to risk and to bring in some inventions. I mean, there is no specific program focused only on startups, but we have programs which are focused on the support of small and medium-sized enterprises. And I mean, frankly speaking, in many cases, startups, they are either small or in some cases even the micro enterprises. So they can fully use those facilities which are already available in Central Asian countries. And I think, probably they need more information about the availability of these funds, of necessary training or other support. I mean, we are not investing money per se. This is rather the area for the private risk funds, equity funds for them. And I think that they, since markets in United States, since markets in Europe, they are getting somehow more saturated. So those venture capitalists, they are looking elsewhere. And I think the Central Asia in this respect is enormous untapped potential. What you need, it's a little bit of the marketing.
Going back to, we briefly talked about food and food processing in general. It was recently announced that Kazakhstan will export honey into European Union. Does the European Union plan to support Kazakh producers in certifying their products according to European standards? And is the EU considering providing technical or financial assistance to Kazakh beekeepers in that regard?
First and foremost, I must congratulate Kazakhstan on actually securing this access to the European market for the honey. One thing is, and which is very important, and this is that it's not that we are doing some specific favor. No, it's just that everybody can access the European market, provided that they actually satisfy sometimes very stringent health and safety rules, especially for those products which are of animal origin, like honey, but also for meat, for dairy products. And I must say that Kazakhstan, and they are not only, we are importing from Kazakhstan also the widely catched fish products. I know that Kazakhstan wants now to expand into the aquaculture products, also looking beyond that to meat, to dairy. European Union is providing assistance in terms of actually providing necessary training, in providing necessary documentation to the Kazakh authorities, controlling authorities, because the most important thing is that those are your own veterinary services, veterinary controls, phytosanitary controls, which are actually overlooking, and that the system is reliable. And then, of course, necessary trainings to, if need be, to beekeepers, but also to other agricultural producers, so that they know what are those things that they must follow. For example, to avoid that honey is contaminated by various pollutants, which could be, like agricultural chemicals, which could be like the fallout from the industrial pollution. So things like that. I would say this is, frankly speaking, we are providing sometimes support to, not to individual farmers, but to farmers' organizations in those Central Asian countries which are, frankly speaking, in economic development, not as developed as Kazakhstan, because, for example, they are also profiting for this preferential system of the access, the tariff system for access to the European Union, exactly because this is sort of the development assistance. So in Kazakhstan, I think those producers they are able to actually to obtain those funds also locally. I think there is an opportunity. We are ready, and we are already providing, when requested, technical assistance. So I'm very optimistic about the availability of Kazakh products on European shelves in coming years.
Yeah, bouncing off of that, aside from honey, what other products do you think can be exported to the EU from Kazakhstan? Are there any plans or preliminary agreements on that regard?
This is for the private operators. I'm not aware, but actually I've seen also in Europe, for example, Kazakh melons. Okay, it's just one example, but which means that whatever you are producing, provided that producers are following some rules, you can export it to the European market. And again, what might be sometimes necessary, it's a little bit of marketing. And then, of course, we must think, because of the existing distances, what is worthwhile to transport over such a distance, because the transport costs, of course, also will impact the competitiveness of your produce. Specifically speaking about the agricultural one, I mean, there is one product, sort of the commodity, which is already on the European market for a number of years, if not for decades, and of course this is the Kazakh grain. This is something which is there. I know that also some vegetable oils produced here, they are available in Europe. So it's just a matter if that makes economic sense for Kazakh exporters to send their goods to Europe because of the distance, because of the price. I think all those products they are welcome. So it's just for the economic operators to decide what makes sense for them.
One of the key areas of cooperation between our two regions is transforming to green energy, green economy. How do you assess the prospects of nuclear energy development in the region as a whole? For example, you know that Kazakhstan is planning on building its first nuclear power plant.
I think the most important thing of all is really to stick to our commitments for the climate change to minimize its impact on our everyday life. And I think over recent years we are witness how the climate change is haunting us, even those who don't believe it. And we have, it doesn't mean always that you would have hotter summers and warmer winters. No, I would say rather what we have because of the climate change, we have more of the extreme weather conditions arriving more and more often, like last year's floods here in Kazakhstan, but also in Europe, where we have, those periods of extreme heat and dryness, and then suddenly those torrential rains which are creating floods. And I think the most important is really to have this green transition, for which, one of the technologically simplest way is renewable energy, but of course that requires also some upfront investments. On the nuclear, I must say it does exist in Europe. Frankly speaking, there is no joint opinion of the European Union as organization, not because each and every member state decides by itself either to have it or not to have. There are countries, like for example France, which relies very heavily on nuclear energy. There are countries which are, now prohibiting the use of nuclear energy in their energy mix. So it's up to each and every country to decide what is really European Union is focusing on as the union, as an organization, is the nuclear safety. Because for us, nuclear safety, the safe handling of nuclear materials, either as a fuel or spent fuel, the technological processes which are used, safeguard measures, is an utmost importance, because we are still living in Europe, but not only Europe, but I think also in other parts of the world, with the consequences of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. Everybody just remembers the Fukushima more recently. So we would say the most important thing is safety. We are not against the nuclear energy. I mean, many of our countries are very successfully using it and even building new reactors. Of course, the new generation of reactors, they are much safer than the old ones. So I think nuclear energy has its place, but it's for each and every country to decide to what extent to use it.
And last but not least, in your opinion, what the future holds for the cooperation between our regions?
I see very bright future, because our cooperation, it's not something artificial, that you think, okay, you need it for symbolic purposes or whatsoever, because then it would be sort of the languishing and not. I mean, here we have enormous mutual interest to work together, and I think with Central Asia as a region, I mean, with each and every country, I think the European Union has very good cooperation. And with the region itself, more asserting itself as a region in various ways, it's going to be even much more fruitful. I mean, we see enormous potential in internal integration of the Central Asia, looking at our own example. I mean, the European Union, it started as a coal and steel community more than 70 years ago. So, and now it involved in one of the strongest economic, but also political blocs in the world. So, I can only wish the same success to the Central Asia.
Thank you so much for this interview and your valuable insights. We hope to see you soon back with us with Kazinform. Thank you so much.
Thank you.